Hi guys, my name is Patrick, but you can call me 26, and what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you a very simple way you could animate views in UIKit, right? So what we have here is this is going to be our login controller, and when you get to it, in the app that we're currently building, I'm just going to show you how we animate the views. So when you get to it, the views are all going to be static and laid out on the screen, right? Now this is particularly fine, you could proceed with this, but what we want to do is we want to add a bit of pizzazz to it, right? We'd like to animate the views onto the screen, right? So how we could do that is we could describe the animations that we want to do, right? The first animation in this question that we want to do is we want to move when the user comes to this screen. We want to move the elements on the screen from off the screen onto the screen, right? So we just want to slide them in so that they look it looks nice. If we can create that effect, right? So how you would do that is you could create it on the particular view controller. In this case, this would be the login controller that we have. But what we want to do is we want to make it extensible by making it available on in this case, all views would have this particular functionality, right? So that if we want to do it also on the next page, like if we want to do it on the forgot password page, or we would like to do it in the register page, that is also possible and pretty straightforward. How we would do that is we could create an extension for a functionality that is going to be applied on all views, right? So I have already a bunch of extensions for views, right? Like this is it, right? So you could come here and create a function for that, right? Now, the key to animating is you first have to move the element. Like you see when we come to it, the element is already on the screen. The key to doing this is actually moving it off the screen and then moving it on the screen, right? That's basically what the animation that we want to create will be, right? So what that is going to look like is first, on the extension for the UI view, we'd like to create a function just to move the view off the screen, right? And since we want to make it extensible, we're going to create a function, and then you're going to pass the X and the Y coordinates for moving it off the screen, right? So let's come here and we say func. It's going to be called something like move view, like so. And this is going to take X, which is going to be a CG float, and it's going to default to 0, right? And then we are going to have Y, similarly, going to be and it's also going to default to 0, like so. Then we're going to have the alpha, and the alpha is also going to be a CG float, like so, co-graphic float, and it's going to be 1. The alpha basically deals with the opacity, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to apply a transform, and we need to give equal space, of course. We need to apply a transform on the particular view, right? So a transform is just going to be a sort of movement, right? In this case, this transform is going to be a translation, right? So what we do is we come here and we say transform, and the transform in question is going to be CG affine transform, right? The CG affine transform is just a transform that either increases the size, moves, or rotates. There are a few options that you could do with this, right? Now, the one that we're interested in is going to be the translation. The translation is moving it across the plane on the screen, right? So we come here and we say translation X and Y, right? Now, the X is going to be the X that we pass in, and the Y is going to be the Y that we pass in, right? And then the alpha is going to be self dot alpha, and this is going to be the particular alpha, right? Now, we have the ability to move the element off the screen. I'm going to show you how we do it in a bit. But now what we want to do is we would like to move it back onto the screen, right? Now, what we want to do is we could create another functionality, and this one is going to be called func. We could say animate to identity. And what this is going to do is it's going to take a duration. We come here and we say duration, and this is going to be a time interval, how long you want your animation to be. Then it's going to take a delay. It may start immediately. You might want to stagger your animation, right? So this is going to be delay, is going to be time interval, like so, and it's going to default to 0. That means that as soon as we call animate to identity, we would like it to occur unless you include a delay, right? And then we have the alpha, and the alpha is going to default to CG float, and this is going to be 1, right? So we have that CG float of being 1, right? And then we come here, and what we want to do is call the UI view, like so, and we want to say animate, and we want the duration to be the actual duration, like so, and the animation, and we could also add the delay, right? Animate, come here, say, after this, say delay, and the delay is going to be the delay, and then the animation, we could hit enter here, and we come into the closure, right? And here the transform is going to be self dot transform. And what transform do you want to have? It's going to be the identity, that is, return it to its original position. So this one is going to move it off, translate it off the screen by a certain number of pixels. This one is going to return it to where it's supposed to be, right? And we also do the same for alpha. We come here and we say self.alpha, and this one is going to be the same as alpha, right? So this one moves it off the screen, this one returns it to the screen and gives it a bit of and makes it visible, right? So I'm going to show you how we could use the alpha to make it progressively get more visible as it moves into place. With that done, the next thing we might want to do is we would actually like to move our elements on the screen, right? So how we do that is we come back to our login controller. So let's go back to the login controller, and in the login controller, what we'd like to do is, after the view did load, we are going to call the create a bunch of, we're going to call the view will appear. Now, view will appear is called before the view controller's view will appear on the screen, right? So it's very good for setting up the views and animations, right? So what we're going to do here is we're just going to say here, view will appear, like so. And then we call the super view will appear like that. And what we would like to do here is this is going to be called this is called the email container view, this is called the password container view, and this is called the login button, right? So what we're going to do is we are going to move them off the screen, right? So how we do that is, let's come and we say password container view, like so, and we just say dot move view, right? So we have here, we're just going to move it on along the x-axis, right? So we say x is going to be -400, right? And if you remember the Cartesian plane, not -400, but x is -400, right? So you do -400, right? And then remember, this is an inverted Cartesian plane, so -400 means that we're decreasing on the x-axis. That means it's going to go left, right? And the opposite would be email container view dot move view, right? And here we're going to have on the x-axis, and this is going to be +400, right? So they're going to go in opposite direction. And in this case, we're increasing the x. And remember, the Cartesian plane starts at the top left, right? Top left. I have a video on that explaining on auto layout, how it works. So if you are not comfortable with auto layout, just go and check one of the videos I released a bit earlier, and it explains all this, right? So these are going to go in opposite directions, right? So let's just run this and you will see exactly what I'm talking about. And okay, let's go here. And of course, you're not going to see it on the screen because this is going to be called just before the view will appear on the screen, right? So what you're going to do after this is we're going to come here and we are going to show it on the screen. So how we show it on the screen, we call a method called view did appear. This method is called after the view has fully appeared on the screen. So it's perfect for starting animations and also used to interact with other views, right? So we move it off the screen, the view will appear, then we move it back on the screen in the view did appear, like so, right? Then we call the super, like so. And what we want to do is come here and we say password container view dot animate to identity, and the duration here is going to be 0.5, right? And then we want the email container view to come a bit after that, right? Not to arrive at the same time, like not to be synchronized. You could synchronize them if you want, but what you want to do is there to be a slight lag. So we come here and we say email container view dot animate to identity, and the duration in question is going to be 0.5, the same, but we want it to come after 0.1 seconds, right? So let's do that and see that. Okay, yeah, we need delay. Come here, say delay, and then we say let's make it 0.2, right? Let's do that, and we're going to see it on the screen, right? And don't worry about that, these errors are not real. So you see, this is what it looks like, right? So let us run it again, and this is what it looks like. You see, this one comes from this side and this one comes from this side, right? So that's basically it, right? And if you want them to come from the same side, of course, you could come here, do this, and run this again. And you see they come from the same side, but there's a slight lag. But it looks better when they come from opposite side, right? And another thing you could do is we could maybe also move it along the y-axis, right? So in order to do it on the move stuff on the y-axis, and maybe we could even create another function, right? So let's go back to our extensions, right? Now in our extensions, what we want to do in our extensions is we also want to add a bit of spring, right? We want to add a bit of spring to the animation, right? So we're going to come here and we say func, and we say animate with spring, like so, with spring. And here it's going to take a bunch of things. It's going to take the duration, the time interval, and the duration, which is the time interval, the delay, and this, and the alpha, and then it's going to add a bunch of other things, right? So you could do here, come here, copy this, paste this, right? And after this, we are going to also add spring damping. I'm going to explain what spring damping is in a bit. Spring damping, which is going to be a core graphic float. Then we are going to say initial velocity, which is also going to be a core graphic float, like so. And then we're going to put in the alpha. We already have the alpha, right? So that's going to be that. So we have the spring damping and the core graphic spring damping, which is a core graphic float, and initial velocity, right? And what we're going to do here is we're going to call the UI view, and we want to dot animate with this one, right? With using spring damping and initial velocity, right? So the duration is going to be duration, right? The delay is going to be the delay, right? The spring damping is going to be the spring damping. The initial velocity is going to be initial velocity, and we hit enter and we can write the code. Now let me explain what the spring damping is. As you move closer to 0, you will make the animation bouncier, right? So if you want the animation to be a bit bouncier, make the value closer to 0, right? And the initial velocity, a value of 1 in the initial velocity, means that the animation will cover the entire distance in 1 second, right? So that's basically it. So what we do here is going to be exactly the same. And if you think about it, these two look very much the same, just that they call slightly different functionality. So we could merge them. Maybe after this I could merge them, and so that we can only call one, and that would save the amount of code we have to write, right? So yeah, when I was building it, I used two different functions, and we could merge them into one. So we'll do that next. Let's just copy that. I've looked at them and they look exactly the same. It's just that this one has spring damping and maybe they call a different function, right? So these two look the same. Let's put it to action and then merge this two, right? Then we can call that a video. So what we could do now is we come back here and we now have the login button. I'm not going to animate the sign in with Apple. You could do that, or the Google sign in. You could also do that, right? So what we could do here is just come here and say login button, and we want to move it. So we come here and we say move view, and how are we going to move it? We're going to move it on the y-axis now, right? Y is going to be, let's say also 400, and here we want the alpha to be 0, right? Now let me explain how that is. So when we move it off the screen, we make it invisible, and as it comes back on the screen, the visibility increases, right? So as it moves, it becomes more and more visible. There's a certain effect that it creates, which is pretty nice, right? Okay, so let us put that into action by coming here, and here what we want to do is just come here and say login button, and you just want to animate with spring, and the duration is going to be the duration. Okay, the duration is going to be 0.5. The delay, maybe also make it come after this other two. We could say here 0.4. The initial velocity is going to be 0, and yeah, so we do that, right? This is spring damping rather than delay. Let's come and give it also delay. Delay is going to be 0.4, and we could make the spring damping 0.5, right? So let's say 0.5, right? So let's run this. Keep your eyes on the login controller, right? Or rather, we're not launching into the login controller, but let's just run this and then go to the login controller. So give it a second. These are the onboarding screens. And if you're interested in this actual app that we're building, you can just have a look at my channel. We have, I think, I've released the first, as I'm speaking right now, I've released the first, is it 4 or 5 hours? So you can have a look at that. So we come here and we see it shoots up, then bounces, right? So maybe to make it more visible, let's just go to the scene delegate, and instead of the start page controller, let's make this the login controller, so that we just open into it, right? So when you launch the app, you go into the login controller and we see it immediately, right? So let's do this. Don't worry about this. So you see it shoots up and jumps like that, right? Of course, we don't have the reason that the navigation controller, we're not wrapping this in a navigation controller, so don't worry about that, right? So we do that and we see it jumping like so, right? So if you want to make it bouncier, like I was saying, if you want to make the animation bouncier, what you would do is you move the value of the spring damping closer to 0, right? So if we move this to, let's say, 0.1 and then run this, you are going to see exactly what that looks like, right? So you see it comes with the bounce, right? With 0.5, the bounce is a bit subdued. If we make it 0.9, you see it just shoots into position, right? But if you make it 0.1, it comes with a lot of bounce, right? Just check at how bouncy it is, right? So you pick the amount of bounciness that you want, and I think in my opinion, a good compromise is 0.5, right? So 0.5 is a perfect compromise for this, and we make it a bit bouncier, right? Okay, fine. That is basically it. And now the next thing we'd want to do is and I noticed that we're not dealing with the alpha, right? So yeah, the alpha, I think if you check, let's just go to animate with spring. I think we set the alpha to 1, right? So the alpha here is going to be 1. So if we set it to 0 here, it's automatically going to be animated to 1, right? So we have set the alpha here to 0 with the login controller, but as we come back, the alpha is gradually raised to 1, right? But now the next thing is you see animate to identity and animate with spring, and the two of them look pretty identical, right? Yeah, so what we would do is we could merge this two. And how we would merge this two is, let's just come here and comment this two out, right? Because there's a bit of overlap, right? So we come here and we comment that out. And when we do that, the next thing would be to create the function, and we're just going to call the function animate view, right? We call it func animate view. And what animate view is going to take, it's going to take a duration, so we could copy that from here. We don't have to do that. And also a delay, yeah, right? And maybe the alpha also. Let's copy those three, right? So let's come here, copy that, copy, come here, and paste it, right? So we have that. And then after that, we are going to add something called useSpring. useSpring is going to be a Boolean, and this is going to be defaulted to false, right? So if we default it to false, that means that it's just going to jump into animate's identity, right? If we set the useSpring to true, we are going to add the animate with spring, right? And we're also going to give the values defaults, right? So basically that. So we do that. It's going to essentially be a flag, and what we want here is just to say spring damping. Oh, we don't need to type it out. We already have it here, right? So we have spring damping at initial velocity, and maybe we could also give them defaults, right? So what would be a good default? Let's come here. Spring damping is going to have a default of, let's say, 1. We don't want to make it too bouncy, right? And initial velocity is also going to have a default of, let's say 0, right? Now we can write the code. And what we're going to do here is it's going to be dependent on whether or not we have the useSpring, right? So we come here and we say, if useSpring, else jump into the other, right? So if useSpring, what we're going to do is we're just going to come here and we are going to call that, call this, right? If useSpring, rather, this is going to be the else, right? So if that, we're just going to come here, comment this out, right? Okay, not that, but comment it out. So if we're not using the spring, just animate with duration, set that, right? Else, we use a spring, so we get here, come here, this, like so, copy this, copy, come here, paste like so, get this, come here, comment it out, and now we have the animate with the duration and all that, right? So let's actually put our functionality to work of the merged function. What we do is we could come here and we could comment all this out, and the view did appear. Come here, do that, and the next thing to do is come here and say password container view, like so, dot animate view. The duration here is going to be 0.5. That's going to be okay for it. Then we say email container view, like so, dot animate view. Animate view, the duration here is going to be 0.5. The delay is going to be 0.2. And we come here, let's see those two first, make sure that they work. And if they do, we are going to do the login button, right? Which has the flag, right? Those two come, and then the login button is moved out, but we never move it back in. So let's come here and we say something like, login button dot animate view, and here we're going to say duration is going to be 0.5 like so, and then you're going to say delay is going to be 0.4 like so, and then use spring is going to be true. Then we're going to say spring damping is going to be 0.5. Then we're going to say initial velocity is going to be is it 0? What's the initial velocity here? Let's just check. Jump to definition. We set the initial velocity to be 0, right? So it's basically the same, right? So you could include this 0, you could leave it out, right? Because it's the default value, right? So that's what it looks like, right? We could make this 0.2 like so, and run this. And that's basically it, right? So that's what it would look like when we are using the spring dumping functionality, where we use the flag true that we're going to use spring dumping, and then we provide this values, and after that we can proceed.